Welcome to Build Your Systems to Scale. I'm Hillary Johnson, Hatch Tribe founder and CEO, and I'm a business coach, and I work with women entrepreneurs and a few guys too to help you learn how to build and grow and scale your businesses and into that beautiful dream that you had, or maybe that no doubt you still have in your heart for what's possible for your business. And this is really about learning how to thrive as a business owner, how to thrive as a CEO. And there is no question that if you want to scale up your business, systems, processes, and automation have to come along the way. And the reason this training is so important is that you may recognize already in your business that you're working hard. You're doing a lot of things, you're touching a lot of things, your team may be touching a lot of things. And the truth is that if we want to make our jobs a little bit more joyful, a little bit easier, systems and processes can come into play and really help support that and make it possible for you to do even more in less time, without the angst, without the hand holding, without the touching of all the things, and make it just easier for you and your team to function as you're building, growing, and scaling your business. So I wanted to start with a quote that I think illustrates absolutely perfectly what happens when we are not implementing systems and processes in our business. This is from John Ratliff, the CEO of Appletree Answers. He says, "We were successful. We were adding customers. Everything was great from the outside. But inside, we were a disaster." And in the larger context of the story, what he's talking about is that because there was a lack of systems and processes and automation inside of their business, the team wasn't working well together. There was a lot of dysfunction inside the company. There was a lot of what we would call just friction. Things weren't working optimally. And so we recognize that when we zoom the lens out and we really think about our businesses, there's a lot of things that can be made easier that don't have to be so hard. And we're going to talk about how to identify those areas and then truly how to implement it in your business. So your goal with this training, and I like to lay this out up front, is today I want you to identify one activity that repeats in your business, and then you will formalize it by building an easily repeatable process. And we're going to talk about exactly how to do that. So I'd recommend getting pen and paper ready, and we're going to dig in. So today's agenda, we're going to dig through four things. The first thing is why systems and processes matter for all businesses, and that is in caps for a big reason. We'll give you an overview of systems, processes, and automation, what they are, how they're a little different, how to think about them all fitting together. Then we'll learn how to identify those easy button areas in your business, meaning what are those things that could be made easier if you simply built a system, a process, or automation for it? And how do you take action to implement this in your business? And we'll start that today. So this is the question I need you to ask yourself right now. Do you want to work harder or smarter? I know that 100% of you just said, well, of course I want to work smarter. Of course I do. I don't want to work harder if I don't have to. Understand that systems and processes and automation allow you. They allow you, they enable you, they empower you to work smarter. And it does not matter how big your business or your team is. All business owners can find easy buttons in their business. So if right now you're thinking, yeah, but I'm a team of one, it's just me. I guarantee you a process can make your job easier, and a system to hold that process can make it easier, and automation can make it easier. And if you have a team of 10 or 100, the same logic applies. And as your team grows, you'll recognize how these systems and processes actually support really good productivity and accountability from your team. This training is all about creating easy buttons in your business. So right now, if you're picturing that Staples easy button, that's where I want you to be thinking. I want you to find the easy button because they are these things that are going to make it easier for you to do your job and to really show up inside of your business. So let's start here and just run through this, because some of you may be hearing about systems and processes for the first time, or really actively thinking about, like, how do I do this? Do I need to be doing this? And so I'd like to run through some criteria, Because I've just said, yeah, they're important for all businesses, but I want you to see why, and we can underscore this by going through these questions. The first is, do you repeat any activities in your business daily, weekly, or monthly? So these are things that you kind of come around to again and again and again. This could be bookkeeping. You do it monthly, perhaps. This could be scheduling your social media. You might do that bi-weekly. This could be creating contracts and sending invoices to your clients. This could be something that's weekly or daily. So all businesses have activities that repeat, and that is a really important place to start. Second question, do you want to work smarter and not harder? We've already answered this, and I know that you said you want to work smarter. Do you want to experience greater ease in your business? If you're not answering yes to this, I'm questioning why. So you quote unquote should be saying, yeah, I want it to be easier to do my job. Why would you not? Do you want to grow or scale your business? If you have an objective to grow or scale, systems and processes are going to be critical for doing that. Do you want to hire people to help you? Let me tell you, having systems and processes in place to help train people as you're onboarding them and helping make them successful in their role is key. And then lastly, do you want to foster really great teamwork? If you already have a team, maybe you're already noticing where there's some things that aren't quite connecting between certain employees that have to touch a activity or a process in your business. Systems and processes will clean all that up, and they really help foster more accountability and flow of a process through your business. So, how do we create easy buttons in our business? I'm going to walk you through it. First up, let's lay out the definition of what a process is, and we'll go a little bit deeper. So a process is very simply a written documentation of the step-by-step actions that it takes to perform a project from start to finish. So we start at A, we go to Z, or whatever other number of steps. What is each specific thing that happens? What happens first? What happens second? What happens third? How do we get there? It should be written. It's step by step. Systems are the place where your processes live and or are brought to life. Now, this can include things like apps or software or tech, but can also include like a non-tech solution. And the example I'm thinking of right now is I have a client who works in the woodworking business, and he's put up a giant chalkboard inside of their warehouse where they're building furniture and the like. And that chalkboard is mapping the process that they've already built, and it's helping their entire team see it in a way that makes way more sense than them using apps or computers, because those are not available and not used inside of the shop. Automation are things you set up that make things happen without you or your team actively touching them. So these are things that happen, as it says, automatically. They're happening in the background. You don't have to do anything. You've set up something up front that has a trigger, and when that thing happens, this other thing happens. And we will talk about how to build those. So I wanted to give you an example of how we might find an easy button in our business and how we would use the process, the system, and the automation to make it all come together. And here we're going to talk about social media. So the process is we would map out step by step in written format how to create and schedule a month's worth of social media posts. All right, so we could do that. We can map that out step by step, and maybe the first place we start is we need to look at the calendar and see how many days of post we need to make for September. And maybe next up is we think about the things that we need to promote during that month, and we build a strategy. And maybe after that, we find images, right? Okay, you following me? Now, once the process is mapped out, we want to put it in a system. So the system for this could be, and there's lots of variations, but maybe we're drafting the post inside of a Google document. In Canva, we're creating the graphics, and then we're using Later to schedule the post and the stories. So in this case, we have 3 different pieces of technology, app, software, that are coming together to form the system that brings that process to life. And the last piece of this is the automation. So in this case, Later, after we've scheduled a post, Later's automatically posting to Instagram and Facebook, and it's also sending you notifications to post your stories, since that has to be done with a little bit of manual trigger. Okay, so do you see how all those fit together? So we start with very basic, like, okay, well, if we're going to build a system or automation, we really need to know what's happening. That's the process. Once the process is mapped, we can put it in a container and house it and be like, every time you do this, these are the pieces that you're going to use. So we're giving our team or ourselves the tools to be able to come back and repeat it every single time. And then automation, when applicable, is going to pop into play, and typically through some form of technology that we're using. So this is the question I would like you to ask yourself right now, and you can hit pause on this. What activities do you repeat regularly in your business? Daily, weekly, and monthly? Now, if you need some ideas to get you started, I'm going to give you a few. And these are common best practice examples, which most businesses will find if they can tackle these and build them into systems and processes, they're really empowering themselves and their team to do really good work. There are many, many more examples. So just know that if I don't say this here, it does not mean it's not important for your business, but these are some that are very common across the vast majority of businesses. First up, creating and scheduling social media. This is one that I hear many of you complain about, is what a burden it feels like to have to do it, but it's because you don't have a system or process for it yet. And you're not batching and you're not creating it together and you're cranking out posts on like a daily or, every couple days basis. That sucks. If you build a system to do a month at a time, we'll set you free. Now, engaging on social media is another one. Do you have a practice for this, to do the DMs, the comments, outbound engagement? What's that system look like? Preparing, sending estimates, quotes, and contracts. This is another one, especially for any of you who are in like the freelance, where you're doing some one-on-one work, where you're doing any contract-based work with clients. You may note that this is an area that trips you up. And in many cases, you can build a better process and system to make this easier for yourself. The next two, writing and publishing blogs, recording and publishing podcasts. Anything you're doing that's content intensive can have a system and a process that makes it so much easier. Creating and sending newsletters might be another one. Invoicing clients, bookkeeping and accounting, fulfilling client orders. So here, if you're especially in a product-based business, this may be something where you really need a system. Onboarding new clients. This might be where someone signed a contract, but now you need 15 things from them to get started. So is it mapped out, and do you track it, etc.? And then last, and this is a really important one, is your sales cycle. Prospecting, outreach, follow-up, these all deserve to be in a process and a system so that you can keep track of them and really have command over what you're doing. And again, remember, the intention with all of this is that it's making it easier for you to repeat it again and again. It's making it easier for you to repeat it daily, repeat it weekly, repeat it monthly, whatever the cadence is. The point in building that system and process is to make it easier for you and or your team to execute the work, okay? So what should I create a process for in my business? So again, I'm going to ask you to think, and you've probably started taking notes about some things, some activities that repeat for your business, but I'm going to reiterate again, things that make a lot of sense to do it for. One, anything that repeats. It doesn't generally make sense to build a process for something that does not repeat, because it's like, well, if you're not going to do it again, why are we going to take the time out to build a process? Anything that you want to make easier is a fabulous candidate for a process. If there's something that you keep, like let's just say it's something you do monthly, and every time you sit down to do it, you're like, oh my God, I cannot remember how the hell to get this done. That needs a process. Anything that you want to teach someone else to do for you. So if there's something you've been toying getting off your plate, like say your bookkeeping or say your social media, where you're like, dude, I got to stop doing this. It's not a good use of my time. I need someone else to do it, but I need to teach them. I need to train them how. Anything that many people touch in your business. So if you have a team of people, whether they're internal or external, contractors or full-time, and a lot of people are working on one project or one client, you do need a system for that, because it helps accountability and it helps the project stay on track. Anything that you want to put in a system, and this is where, like, if, for example, if you're thinking about using, say, a project management system like Asana, Well, you got to know what to put in there. We don't just go into it and start adding tasks because that's a task list. And anything that you want to automate, maybe right now you have a daydream of having an email automation series that welcomes new subscribers and sends out content for the next month. Well, we've got to build the process for that first, right? So these are really good reasons to build processes. So what I'd like you to do is start thinking and narrowing down one thing that repeats in your business, one thing that feels like a fabulous candidate for a process. And that's what we're going to do, is we're going to build that process. So do you have an activity in mind that'd be awesome to make easier? I want you to pick only one to start. You cannot build 3 processes at once. Trust me on this. Let's keep your brain in sharp focus on one thing at a time. You can always come back and build more and more processes over time, but we just want to get started with one. So, how do you create your easy button? Let's figure it out. All right, step 1. You're going to map the process. Now, a few keys here is to understand when we're mapping the process, it is intended to be step by step. So we do want to break those steps down into small increments. It's not like, and the joke I often use when we talk about things being too big is like if we were to design a website, you wouldn't have a step that says design the first page, right? Or design the home page. Like that's a giant task. But if we broke that down, what we might say is find the template for the home page. That's a singular task. Find 3 images for the home page. That's a singular task, right? So when we're mapping a process, we want to pull it down to a small step. And think about how you go from 0 to finish. So if we haven't yet started it, what's the first thing we do? And when we're finished, how do we know? What's the very last thing we're going to do? It needs to be very specific and detail-oriented, and it needs to be written down. Now, by the time you finish, someone else should be able to read what you've written and understand exactly how to do it. So what we don't want to do is create like some Cliff Notes version that only you understand, because then what's the point? The point here is really to empower and enable someone else at some point in time to do work for you, even if in the interim, it's just you doing it for yourself. So we're going to save you that time by really mapping it out with the intention that later on, someone else can do it. Now, I want you to keep it simple, and I mean this. Like, this does not need to be a complicated endeavor. You're going to start by writing down that process step by step. Many people find pen and paper is a fabulous place to start. Then you can put it into a Google Doc or a Google Sheet, and an online shareable file is really a best practice for this because we want this to be something that you can change and update over time. Then I want you to walk through the process the next time you do it so you can check it for accuracy and make some updates. So you may notice like, oh, dang, I forgot after I do this thing, another thing happens, and I've totally missed that in the process. So that's the point of going back through it, kind of testing it out. And then the ideal thing is to have a team member or a close friend read it and walk through it to see if it makes sense. Now, here's a template that you have in the Systems to Scale workbook. And this is a way that you can start to map this out. And this is in a Google Sheet, which of course could be downloaded into Excel if you prefer, but you already know my position. I think it's preferable to be in Google Sheets where it stays forever and it can be shared with someone else. So what you're going to outline is what's the step, activity, or task. And here, this is getting a little bit, it's leaning towards hiring, but I think it's a great place to do it, is how long does it take? So let me come back to this example of like social media, which we've been playing with. You know, maybe the first thing is like, look to see how many days are in the month. That's going to take 1 minute, right? The next thing, build a strategy for the social media posts that need to go out this month. That might take an hour. Okay, cool. Now, the next thing I want you to think about is when is that task due, day or date? This sometimes helps you think about like when you're going to be executing this task. So if we're going to do a month's worth of social media at a time, you're probably going to want to be building that strategy probably two weeks at least before that next month begins to give you time to get the other things done. And then last thing, who's responsible for the task? And this is really helpful as you start to assign things to a team. So for the sake of getting started, I really only need you to focus on what's the specific step, activity, or task, but the other things are there for you as you start thinking about handing this over to someone else, okay? Now, here's an example. You'll also find this in the Systems to Scale workbook, and there's going to be 2 examples. I gave you one for blog writing and one for podcast publishing. So you'll see here, mapped out, there are 13 steps that go from, in this case, scheduling to have a blog written by an author and giving them a deadline, all the way through us emailing a link of the live article to the blogger when it's already published on the site. And you can read every step in between. So this is going to give you a good example of what a real process looks like that's mapped out in great detail and intended to be very straightforward. Okay? So this is kind of what you're shooting for. Now, once we have that, so once you've mapped out those step-by-step for that process, the next thing is like, all right, where are we going to put it? So we want to put it in the system. So the questions we need to ask is like, where should this process live? What tech, apps, docs, etc. would make it most easily accessible and usable? And you want to choose the place where that process is going to go. Now, to be clear, we got lots of options. It could be a Google Sheet or a doc. It could be an app, software, tool, etc. There are lots of options, so it's really going to be relevant to what you are doing and your current team to make sure that it lives in a place that makes sense. Now, I do want to give you some resources because in many cases you guys come and ask me like, hey, what would you use for blank? And I wanted to give you some that are very common, that come up quite frequently working with clients and even inside of our community. So from project management, there's several tools available. And I want you to think of project management like it's a very grown-up task list where you're dumping in a process, and I'm going to show you one in a minute. You put in a process that's step by step, you assign tasks to particular people on your team, and they have the ability to provide updates or check them when they're complete, and you can really contain all projects in one of these systems. Social media, many of you are already using these tools, but of course these are tools where you can pre-schedule the majority of your social media so that it's out publishing for you and you are not having to manually do that. CRM and sales, these are other really important things. HubSpot is certainly the one that I recommend most often, and HoneyBook is another great one. And all of these actually have some other capabilities that can get into contracts and some other things, but I'm focusing here primarily on the fact that if you're in a business where you are actively reaching out and working the sales cycle, and especially for one-on-one service-based businesses, you definitely need a CRM and something to manage your sales efforts. Accounting and contracts, I group these together, although they're a little bit different. But of course, if you're sending contracts, you don't want to ask people to fax them back. We want to do that digitally. You can build beautiful templates and have them there and ready to go as soon as you sign a client. And of course, accounting, I mean, we already know the importance of that and getting invoices paid and not making it complicated for people to pay us. And then in this last little group, email and DMs. So there's a couple of things here. You know, obviously, if you're using email newsletters and you want to automate some things, most of your email providers are going to have the ability to do that. But I also dropped in here ManyChat, which is actually a really cool piece of software that can be used to automate DMs, like Facebook and Instagram is on the way, from my understanding. So these are some, but they are not all of the tools that you could be using to house certain processes. So if you have a question about what to use or you're not sure, drop it in the comments, post it in our Facebook group. I'm always happy to weigh in, and of course our community is as well. Now, I wanted to show you an example of how a process can live in Google Sheets. Now, if you remember a couple of slides ago, I shared with you a process that was around the blog, publishing our blog. So we have a process for that, and our process actually lives primarily in Google Sheets, and you'll see in this case, all of those things that I had outlined in that prior process live here. So blog scheduled and author given deadline, and below that is the person who's responsible for it, Nina. Article received, Nina. So she would come in here and update this worksheet to tell us when the article was received, when it was reviewed and ready to publish, when it was posted to the Google Drive. So you'll see there's dates living in that section below. And then across that gray, you're seeing all of those deliverables. And this helps us stay on track with our blog or any other content that we're creating. So I wanted to give you that as an example. But here's another one. We also use Asana. This is our project management system, and this is just one section of something that Nina actually works on, which is collective Facebook group engagement. And so here there are deliverables, there are dates they're due. You'll see it's assigned to her. So Nina's name is there, the date that it's due. And then if over on the left-hand side, you'll see there's like that little circle with a check. When she completes it, she hits that little check mark. And then in these cases, because they're all recurring tasks, they pop back up in her calendar and then they come back for the following week or the following month. So anyway, I wanted to share that so you could see how a process can also live in Asana or any other project management tool. Okay, last in the phase of this is automation. Now, I want to be very, very clear. Not everything can be automated, and that's okay. So some software and tools do not allow for automation, and it doesn't make any sense. But if it's an option and your system allows for it and it's ready, or you're ready to use it, set it up. Now, important part about automation is you gotta test it. We've had plenty of automation that has gone awry, like where we've accidentally added people to an email list that they were not meant to go on, and then that automation triggered, and then they got sent a bunch of emails that they were not meant to get. So just know that you do want to do testing because automation is going to be running in the background without your supervision, and you want to make sure it's working wonderfully. But another place I would suggest you look is Zapier and IFTTT, if this then that. Do look at those because they will give you some ideas for some really powerful automations that you can set up for your business where they can link together different tools. And we use Zapier and we have it set up running all kinds of automations in the background. So I wanted to say here, as it relates to tools, I'm not giving you tools because typically automation is going to come as a part of an app or a software you're already using. So refer back to that the system slide, look at those tools, or if you're using another tool already, see what automation's available, and then determine if it's something you want to implement in your business. And again, look at Zapier and IFTTT. Now, I wanted to show you an example of an email automation. So we use Kajabi. It houses the CEO Collective and our programs and courses that we sell. And email is part of that. So you're seeing how, in this case, we have a couple different things housed in one piece of technology. And in this case, we have a email automation series that is set up so when people join the CEO Collective, it triggers an automatic response via email, and it puts them into this email automation series. There are, in this case, 4 emails that come out over the course of 4 days. So the first one's immediate, the next one's the next day, and then all of these send and we don't look at them. So we've created the emails in advance, we've set up the triggers to both subscribe and unsubscribe them from those, and then they receive those emails over time. So I wanted to share that with you as just an example of what an automation might look like. And in this case, it's around email, which would be a very, very common one for most businesses. So I want to answer some questions here that I think you might be thinking because this comes up a lot. So the first one, this sounds like a lot of tedious work, is it? Truth. It is going to feel a bit tedious initially. But when it's done, it really sets you free. And I need you to remember why you're doing it to begin with. It's about making it easier for you to do your job repeatedly over the long haul. And the important part here is I only want you to start with one process. If you start biting off 3 and 4 at a time, you're not going to complete them. So start with one, build the process, get it in a system, test it, see how it works. Follow it as you work through it that next week or month and see how it goes. I promise you, you will notice very, very quickly how it's making it a lot easier for you to implement that activity in your business or for your team. Now, how do I make sure this process really works? And the key here with all processes and systems is we need to test it. And this is like everything. We don't want to map these steps out and then bury it in a drawer or leave it in a file and not look at it. You need to pull it out and follow it along. So after mapping the process out, test it. Make the adjustments for the things that don't make sense or the steps that you've accidentally forgotten. And then when you teach it to someone else, whether it's a new hire or someone on your current team, you're going to get an even better sense about what's not making sense to them. So do listen to your team if they're telling you like, hey, I'm not tracking, like I get to step 5 and then 6 doesn't work. Be like, maybe there's something missing, right? Why do I need to do this again? I'm not sure like this sounds like a good use of my time. I understand this concern because this is an activity that is very much working on your business and in your business. When you sit down to build a system or process, you are actually doing both. You're working on it because this is big level. This is how you grow and scale your business. It's also working in it because you're literally having to think about the step-by-step things like how do you do what you do? But what I want to ask you again, do you want to make your job easier? This is not a short-term payoff, right? Hear me loud and clear. Systems and processes do not pay you off tomorrow. They pay you off for a lifetime. It's a big picture thing. Do you really want to grow and scale your business? And I need you to ask yourself that very seriously. If you do, you have to do this. I cannot say this enough. Because otherwise you're going to bring people onto your team and they are literally not going to be successful in their job because they are very unclear on what they need to do. It is one of the biggest problems we have with business owners bringing on first couple of employees is that they are very unclear about their expectations, and then their expectations are not met because they have not communicated them, and they end up finding that they do not like their hire. And it feels like it's more work than it's worth to bring them on board. And I can assure you that reflects back to you, babe. So if you want to get things off your plate, if you want to train other people to do your job so that you can focus on your zone of genius, you need systems and processes to do that. And I cannot say this enough, but with 100% certainty, you cannot scale a business if you do not have systems and processes in place. So if right now you're saying, I want to grow this business, I want to scale it, you need to be taking this very, very seriously. Your success is contingent upon it. It is the way you grow. It is critical for scaling. So I want you to take it seriously and to take action. So if you have not identified that one area that repeats in your business, do that before we end this workshop. And in the next hour or in the next day, I want you to formalize it by building that easily repeatable process. Go back, look at the examples, go dig into that worksheet that we've provided with some examples and look and see the depth that we're looking at. Map it out. You can do this. I promise you it will set you free. And of course, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to drop them in the comments. I am happy to lean in and give you any insight that I can to help you make this a bit easier as you find those easy buttons in your business. So with that, we will sign off from today's training. I wish you so much luck in your business now and always, and just know that we've got your back. We're with you. You know, we walk the same walk with you every day. Systems and processes are critical to our success at Hatch Tribe and certainly to my success as an individual. And I can't say enough, you know, that this is important work. So make it happen. I got your back. Go do it and have a great day. All right. Talk to you soon.